We are once again starting a monthly wrap-up with a low camera battery. Why do I do this all the time? So hi, we're gonna have to be a little bit quick here. But welcome to the November reading wrap-up. These are all the things that I read last month. Was not my best reading month. I read like literally almost half of what I read in October, at least in terms of page count. So I don't even have that much to talk about regardless. So it all kind of works out. So let's get right into it. In November, I read 11 books, DNF'd 1, and that was a grand total of 3,628 pages with 40 hours of audiobook listening. I started the month with Wisteria by Adalyn Grace. This is the third and final book in the Belladonna series, and I ate this up. Oh my god, it was so good. I gave it a 4.5 star. It wasn't quite a 5 star, but it was so close. Like, it was so close to a 5 star. I absolutely adored the romance in this one. The third book follows a different main character than the first two books do, and I loved that. I love the main character from the first book as well too, but this character was also just fantastic. I loved her romance. It just had me like squealing and kicking my feet the whole time. I had a blast with this book. I loved how it ended. Oh my god, it was so good. It had me on like the edge of my seat the whole time, and I just blew through this book so fast. I couldn't put it down. And yeah, just phenomenal read all around. Solid 4.5 stars for that one. Then I read The Umbrella Academy, Volume 1 by Gerard. This is a really beautifully done graphic novel. Like, let me try and find a non-spoilery that I can show. Yeah, like very vibrant, really fun colors. I loved the art in here. It was so beautiful. That was honestly the best part of it. The story was fine. It was interesting, but I wasn't that engaged with it. I have seen the first season of the show, but I never carried on after that. And it was also years ago, so I kind of forget all the details of the show. I have no idea how it compares to the comic. But yeah, this was just fine. I liked it, but I probably won't continue on with the series. After that, I read The Only Purple House in Town by Aquirre. This one is a paranormal romance set in like a small town where the main character inherits a house from her, I think it was her aunt that passed away, and she's broke as hell, so she starts looking for roommates, and this becomes a super cute like found family kind of thing. That was the part that I absolutely adored about this. The second this like curmudgeonly old man was introduced, I knew for a fact that I was gonna cry at least once in this book, and I was correct. I cried very hard because of that old man. And yeah, the main character just like goes and collects all these people who are down on their luck and just takes them in basically, and they just become this beautiful family, and it was so heartwarming and beautiful, and I loved it. I was really not a fan of the romance though. It was creepy to say the least. The love interest is somebody who knew the main character when they were very small children. She like stopped people from bullying him, and then because of that he was like obsessed with her for the last 20 years and would like frequently stalk her social media, and has just kept tabs on her for years and years and years, and she has no idea who this guy is, and then ends up becoming her roommate, and she still has no idea that he knows her, and it was just like really uncomfortable. Yeah, I just felt like things were kind of forgiven too easily, and I didn't like that part of it at all. It just didn't feel like it was needed. There could have been a much more interesting way to introduce these characters and build their romance without having to have him like basically stalking her for many years. Like, not like full-on stalking, but like even he knew that what he was doing was creepy. Like he admitted that from his first chapter basically, and it just felt really off and not needed. So because of that, I couldn't give it a 5 star. I gave it a 4.5 instead, just because I love the other cast of characters so much. I love the rest of them. It was just that one character that I really didn't enjoy. Otherwise, this was fantastic. It was really interesting magic system as well too. It has to do with like fae and shifters and that kind of thing, and witches and stuff like that. So it was very interesting, and I definitely enjoyed it, and I do want to check out more books in the series as well too at some point. After that, I read When I Arrived in the Castle by E.M. Carroll. This was a absolutely stunning graphic novel. It was sapphic and had to do with like a vampire lady and this cat girl. I don't really know, but it was cool as hell. Plot-wise, I'm not entirely sure what was happening for a good chunk of it. It was very short. The story kind of felt half-baked, but the characters and the artwork and the atmosphere of it was just incredible. It was very gothic and just absolutely stunning. So I very much enjoyed that part of it. And the story was interesting. I just had a hard time following it. I'm still not really sure what I read, but it was very, very good, and I gave it a 4-star. And then at long last, I read Starling House by Alix Harrow. I've had this book on my TBR for so long. It was kind of embarrassing, and I finally picked it up, and this was good. I liked it. I gave it a 3.5 star. I don't really think that it's a horror, to be honest. It's more of a paranormal fantasy that just happens to have a very gothic horror setting, but this didn't feel like horror to me. And while this was very good, I do see what people mean when they say that it's kind of mid. I kind of agree with that. I liked the characters. I especially liked the main character and her brother's relationship. I thought that it was really interesting, and I loved reading about how close they are. I liked the history of the town quite a bit. The romance was fine, but I didn't really feel connected to it at all. It also didn't really feel like it was needed again, but that's what it is. I don't really have a lot to say about this one, unfortunately. I wish that I liked it more than I did, but I also didn't dislike it, so we're just kind of middle of the road here. And then I read a duology this month as well. I read them back to back, and those were Sisters of the Snake and Daughters of the Dawn by Serena and Sasha Nanua. This one is a Hindu-inspired YA fantasy that has to do with a princess and a thief beggar character who end up running into each other one day and realize that they are identical, and they decide to swap places because the princess character has to go on this quest to go and find something that'll help to hopefully stop a war from happening, and the thief character gets to live in a palace and be a princess for a little while. And they also have to figure out the whole twin thing, and there's also snake magic, which is super cool. I have pretty similar feelings about both books. I definitely liked book one a hell of a lot better because it had way more focus on like the world building and the magic and that kind of thing, whereas book two was a lot about the romance, and I hated the romance so much. It was so unnecessary and just like clogged up the plot. It did that a bit towards the end of book one, but it was super heavy in book two, and it just really took away from the story for me. They would be in the middle of having a really intense discussion about the plot and things that were happening and people's lives being at stake, and then all of a sudden it's like his eyes darkened and my cheeks flushed, and I'm just like, why? Like, why are we doing this right now? Like, there was so much more interesting things happening aside from the romance that it just really didn't feel like it was needed. I would have loved to have this be a story that focused on sisters and them finding each other and the one character discovering her magic and that kind of thing. That would have been way more interesting. But instead we got a super interesting world and very interesting magic and a great plot, and 2/3 of it was awkward romance. So, you know, it wasn't the best in that regard, but I gave book one a 3.5 star and book two got a 2.5 star. I then did my reread of The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I absolutely adore this book so much. I wanted to reread book one in order to refresh myself for book two, which I'm reading hopefully next. I'm so excited. And this was just as good as it was the first time around. I absolutely adore this book so much. It's easily one of my favorites. Honestly, books like this is why I still read YA stuff, because I'm very often let down by YA fantasy these days. I find them to be like really awkward and dramatic and that kind of thing, that sometimes I feel like I just shouldn't bother reading them anymore. But then there's books like this where I read them and I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I want. This is a 5-star read for me, and I wouldn't have read it if I didn't pick up YA once in a while. But anyways, I just adore this book so much. I can't wait for the sequel. If you have not read this book, please go and do so, because it is just out of this world. It's so good. This book makes me so hungry as well. The descriptions of food in this is so good, and I want to eat all of the things that they have in this book. It sounds amazing. And then I picked up The Black God's Drums by Djeli Clark. This is a novella that takes place in New Orleans, and the audiobook narrator did such a good job with it. I love that thick, beautiful New Orleans accent. It's so good. So listening to this book was such a delight. Plot-wise, I got a little bit lost. Didn't fully understand what was going on, but I did have a good time with the characters and the world and all the beautiful imagery in there as well too. So I definitely had a good time with this book, and I gave it a 4-star. And then I picked up We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleiwer, I think is the name. This was fucking terrifying. Like, it was so creepy. This one takes place in a house where this couple has just moved in, and one day the main character is home alone while her partner is out shopping, and she gets a knock on the door, and it's this family being like, hey, the dad is like, I used to live here when I was a kid. Is it okay if I come in and show my family around? And she wants to say no because she's uncomfortable, but she's also a huge people pleaser and ends up saying yes.